Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Live. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes, as I always do, for Facebook to let everybody know that I'm live so people can start logging in and whatnot. So those of you that are already here, please go ahead and grab yourself a glass of water or a paper and a pen if you're a note taker, and we'll get started as soon as I know that there's people here. So you can go ahead and put a comment in the comments section, or click on one of the icons and let me know that you're here so I know when everyone's here. Hey Bethany, how you going? Welcome. So I'm Tanja from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship, for those who don't know me, and we are live for our Monday Night Live show, which happens every Monday at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And tonight's Monday Night Live is pretty cool. I think I'm a bit excited about it because it's 10 questions with Tanja. So people who follow the Tanja Kraus Horsemanship page have sent in their questions. Hey Michelle, how you going? And we're going to go ahead and answer those questions that people have sent in. So while we're waiting for everyone to get settled, please, like I say, say a comment like Hillary just did. Hello Hillary, thank you for joining us. And go ahead and share it. Invite people that you might know that might be interested, and let them know that we're live. So tonight we've got a few different questions that have come in to the Tanja Kraus Horsemanship page, which is really cool. So hey Shalene, how you going? And thank you so much to everyone that not only shared the post asking for questions to come in, but those of you that did take the time to send in questions, because obviously we wouldn't have a show without them. So the first question that I'm going to cover today, and I just want to let everybody know that, of course, because we're doing 10 questions in one show, it's not going to be a comprehensive answer as if I'm doing a topic on the show, because obviously normally we spend an hour talking about one specific thing, and now we're going to talk about 10 things in an hour. So it's basically as if you ran into me at a course, or not necessarily if you were at a course because we'd have more time, but let's call it an elevator question. So if you ran into me in an elevator and you said, hey Tanja, what do you think about this? These are the answers that I would give you. So they're not particularly comprehensive, but they will definitely get you started on the right track. So Jackie, thank you very much. She sent in a few questions, which is really cool. And so we're going to get started with one of hers, which is, how do you know if your horse is sore or whether it's just being marish? I myself have a mare that is very marish, so you can approach her, or when you touch her and things like that, she can get a little bit twitchy at times, and I would say narky, but she would like to be narky, but she has more respect than to be narky, so she just pulls faces, and you know, it doesn't go any further than that. You can see that she's displeased, so to speak, but it wouldn't go any further with her. So I know exactly what Jackie's talking about, and what I would say in regards to knowing if a horse is just being merry or whether they're actually sore is looking for consistency. So I'd want a consistent reaction in the same spot if I thought the horse had an injury. Jackie has said that she has had the vet attend to this horse, and she can still see that there's something not right, but the vet couldn't find anything concrete that's wrong with the horse. So I would be looking for consistency, as I say, in the way the horse moves, or inconsistencies in the way that they move, so to speak. Consistency in reacting to the same area being touched, or the same stretch being asked for, or consistency in the reaction being to the same thing, which will give you a pretty good indicator. Well, when I bend her to the left, she's always narky, or she always reacts, but she doesn't do it when I bend her to the right, or it's not as bad, or something like that. That would probably indicate to you that the horse might be sore. The other thing, the biggest thing that I would recommend is observing her in the paddock and watching her paddock behavior. So willingness to run around with the herd, willingness to play. Is she removing herself from them when they're all running around? When you call them up for feed, is she happy to run or canter, or is she You know, is she way behind? Does she only walk up? Does she only trot up? If she's not voluntarily wanting to move very much, then that's a pretty good indicator that she's actually sore. And the final thing that I would recommend is trying to take some slow motion video of her, and then you can play the slow-mo back. So if you've got a smartphone, most smartphones have a slow-mo video function, so it's a really good idea to film her through all of her gaits on both sides, and see if there's something that you can pick up that isn't as visible to the naked eye, but you're going to pick it up in slow-mo. So that's for Jackie's first question. Hello Sarah, welcome. Hi Trudy, thanks for coming and joining us. The second question is from Jackie as well, and her question is, if the horse has had a good foundation and then has been turned out for 3 or 4 years, what can you expect from the horse? Is he still going to behave as a 6-year-old even though he's 9? So some of the things that come to mind when I think about that question, hey Anna, thanks for joining. Some of the things that come to mind when I think about that question is she says the horse has a good foundation. So when you bring a horse back in from a really long spell, like 3 or 4 years, the foundation is still going to be in there, but you need to bring them on slowly because they're not going to be as physically fit, and they're not going to be in the routine of being ridden and things like that. So I would do a very mild restart on the horse, so it wouldn't be necessarily as comprehensive as if I was starting a horse from scratch, or I was starting a horse that had behavioural problems. You know, I've got Cooper down the paddock heel have had a 9-month spell by the time I get on to back on him. So bringing him back in is going to be a slow-ish process. He's a little bit different. Obviously, he's been ridden for 8 years, but if the foundation is a good foundation, then there should be no problem bringing the horse back in. In regards to him acting like a 6-year-old, he's going to act like a 6-year-old in the level of his experience. So he's obviously been running in a paddock for 3 or 4 years, so he's not been out and about. He hasn't been maybe in the company of other horses being ridden. He hasn't had the expectations of the ride being put on him. So he's still going to be immature in that regard. But in regards to his physical maturity and mental maturity in dealing with confidence things, he should be a little better than he was when he was 6, being a 9-year-old horse. Hello, Abby, welcome. So, yes, bring him back slowly. He is going to be more mature physically, if not necessarily mentally and with regards to riding. But the skills that he knows should be in there as long as you bring them on slowly. And when I say slowly, you know, a couple of weeks, you know, letting him know how to get back into routine. Hi, Angel, welcome. Another question from Michelle. I think Michelle said she was here. I'm sorry. I've said hello to so many people that I can't remember. So hopefully Michelle is here from New Zealand, and I'm answering your question, Michelle, because I'm putting in my order for good weather. I arrive on Thursday this week, and I would really like the weather to heat up. So if you can put that order in, that'd be great. Michelle's question is, what is my general rule of thumb when it comes to saddle or bit fitting? She's saying yes, great. Do I have a checklist that is crucial for the horse and the rider individually? So it's a 2-part question. So that's the first part of the question. Yes, I have a checklist, and the checklist is primarily all about the horse. I see a lot of people, when it comes to saddle fitting, picking a saddle that is comfortable for them, and my concern isn't for the comfort of the rider, it is primarily for the comfort of the horse. My secondary concern is the position of the rider. So if the saddle puts you in a poor position, then it's not a saddle that I would recommend. But if it puts you in a great position, but you're a little uncomfortable because you're not used to the saddle, then my answer would be you need to get used to the saddle. You'll get used to it. It's like buying a new pair of shoes. As long as they're the right size, they will wear in and you'll be comfortable wearing them. So yes, I have a checklist, and I always say, you know, listen to the horse. Observe the behavior that the horse has when he is wearing the saddle. So let's talk about the saddle first. So his behavior when he's being ridden with that gear. I always check my sweat marks when I get off the horse. So what I'm looking for is even sweat marks on either side of the spine. If the horse has had a really big day's work, then there's potentially going to be sweat over the spine, and that's not necessarily a cause for concern. If you do a hard day's work on a horse, he's going to be sweaty all over his back, and obviously, down his neck and on his rump and in between his legs and all that sort of stuff. So you need to take him for a ride that gets him sweaty enough to present sweat marks, but not so much of a ride that's going to get him so sweaty that he's just sweaty all over and you can't actually see sweat marks because the entire horse is wet. But sweat marks are very important that they're even, and dry patches are indicators of either pressure or space. So that's something that you need to determine yourself, and adjusting pads is a really good way to determine whether it's a simple adjustment of pad thickness or size, or whether the saddle is actually not fitting. The third thing that I want to talk about when it comes to saddle fit is putting the saddle on the horse without a pad and making your observations. Obviously, if it's sitting down on the wither or it's bridging or something like that, then it's not a good fit, and that's something that most of us should be able to see. Just from a logical perspective, if you put a saddle on a horse and it sits nice and evenly, it's not tipping up at the back, it's not squishing down at the front, you can put your hand under it pretty reasonably. With the dressage saddles, we obviously used to say, can you see light coming straight up the spine when you've got no pad on it? All of those sort of things. I think a lot of us can tell. We get wrapped up in saddle fit, but a lot of us can put a saddle on and go, you know what, I can tell that doesn't fit just by looking at it. So trusting our instincts when it comes to that, and then going beyond the observation of the saddle and adjusting pads, taking the horse for a ride and that sort of thing. Fit without pad, observation of fit, and then obviously the observation of the fit with the pad on and seeing if the pad has made an adjustment to the saddle. When it comes to the bit, what I want to do is observe where the bit sits in the horse's mouth, making sure that it's not going to, that it's not sitting on any teeth, and where it moves to when I pick it up. So I stand beside the horse and I let the horse just hold the bit in his mouth normally, the way that it just sits there. I'm not adjusting the reins or anything like that. And I open the lips and I want to see where that bit sits in the mouth. I want to see where the bit sits when the horse actually lets it go and relaxes his mouth. And I want to see where the bit sits when the horse picks it up. And I want to see how much space the bit is taking up in the mouth. Sometimes, the old saying when we used to go into saddle shops when I was a kid, they always used to say, oh, the thicker the bit, the kinder it is, and the thinner the bit is, the crueler it is. And that's simply just not true. My horse Cooper, for example, has a really low palate. He's got a very thick tongue. There's not a lot of space in his mouth at all, and so for him to carry a fat bit would be drastically uncomfortable for him. So every horse is different, and it takes you to actually open those lips, observe where the bit sits, and observe how much space is in there for the horse, and whether they can hold it nicely, or whether their mouth is sort of being pushed open by the fatness of the bit. I always want to try different bits with all different horses, because every horse is going to be comfortable and uncomfortable in different bits. So some horses like a loose ring snaffle with a single join, some horses like a loose ring snaffle with a double join, some horses like a egg ring, an egg butt snaffle, so it's got it doesn't have the movement on the sides, etc., etc. So I absolutely recommend letting the horse tell you whether he's comfortable with the bit. And the way that you're going to determine those kind of things are by putting the bit in his mouth, observing how he just carries it around. So you might put it in and have the halter underneath and take him for a little bit of a lead, and then maybe a walk and a trot and a canter online, and observe what's happening with you on the ground. And then you can go ahead and hop on him and do maneuvers that he's very, very familiar with. You're not going to try and teach him anything new in regards to trying new equipment. You wouldn't try to teach him something new when you're trying to fit a new saddle or a new bit or any other type of new equipment. Always go to something that you know that the horse knows inside and out, back to front, because that way, you know, if I got on Cooper and said, hey Cooper, here's a new bit, lateral bend, and he tried to turn himself inside out, I'd know, hey, he really doesn't like this bit because he knows a lateral bend. He's done the maneuver probably 100,000 times, so it would be the bit causing him to react to the maneuver, not the maneuver itself. So absolutely try lots of different bits on your horses and do maneuvers that they're very familiar with, and let them tell you, you know, whether they're comfortable or not. Changing one thing at a time, so you wouldn't go out and change the bit and change the saddle and change the pad, because then if you get a behavioural problem, you wouldn't know which one is causing the behavioural issue. So if you've gone out and bought a new saddle, then you want to make sure that you've put the same bridle on that you normally use, and maybe the pad from the old saddle, so you can go ahead and make sure that if there is a huge reaction, that the horse is that it is from that, potentially from that one piece of equipment, not several pieces of equipment. The second part to Michelle's question was, are there any less obvious issues that can occur when fitting a Western saddle or bit incorrectly? And will your horse give you any obvious signs that the bit or saddle is hurting him compared to his behavior when he is happy with the gear? So I kind of just covered that in regards to make sure that you're definitely doing maneuvers that he knows. Because if he has a bad reaction within a maneuver that you know that he's comfortable with, then that's a pretty good indicator that he might be being uncomfortable, but not necessarily. We did have a horse at a course recently that she is still learning how to carry herself properly. She's still learning self-carriage. She is an off-the-track thoroughbred. And so she doesn't typically go into soft feel very well on the best of days. She's still learning how to hold that consistently. And she will attempt to do it. She will do it. So we knew that she was able to do it. But then when we had a closer look at the saddle had actually gotten to the point where it was sitting down on the wither of that horse. And so it was quite incredible that she wasn't bucking or pig rooting or trying to bite when the rider was riding or anything like that. So she was a very generous horse in her nature, and she was, you know, she wasn't reactive at all to the ill-fitting saddle. And clearly it was, you know, it was sitting right down on the wither, so it would have been quite uncomfortable for her. So horses can be really generous in their nature, and they can put up with a lot of discomfort before they will have a reaction to it. So just because your horse doesn't have a reaction when you put new gear on doesn't mean that it's comfortable for him. It may mean that he's just super generous and super respectful. So it pays to go through a few different maneuvers and observe not only behavioral issues, but how the horse is carrying himself, whether he's able to carry himself correctly with that gear on as he normally would, relative to his level of education, I guess. Christine has asked, what do you do when your horse has sticky feet and refuses to move when riding? So this is going to be a two-part answer. The actual skill that I would use when my horse, like if I'm walking down the trail and the horse stops dead, the skill that I would use to unstick a horse's feet would be to ask the horse to step in a lateral direction with the front end, so sideways, or I would disengage his hindquarter and ask him to, again, step hindquarters around the front end. The reason being that once my horse is stuck, once he's not willing to go forward, it's the pressure that I'm going to have to put on him to try and drive him forward could potentially make him react in a negative way. So what I want to be able to do is encourage the horse to step sideways, which will unlock that foot, and then he can go ahead and keep walking. So they're the two techniques that I would primarily use if I was on a horse that just stopped. Now, the second part to the answer of that question is I need to determine why the horse is stopping. And without observing the horse, I can't know why the horse is stopping. But some of the things I'm going to do is make sure that I'm doing training that has a logic to it for the horse. So, for example, I see a lot of horses that will stop when they're doing flat work or typical just circle after circle after circle, because it doesn't make a terrible amount of sense to them. So once they've done 50 circles or 10 circles or 5 circles or whatever it is, they can tend to start pulling back or sucking back and stopping, because they're sort of like, why do we keep going round and round in circles? Whereas something like a trail or following a fence line or, you know, doing point-to-point exercises. So I'll say we're walking to that tree and then we're walking to that tree or fence post or whatever it is. You could even do it with cones, but you do it in, you know, in a point-to-point fashion. So you focus on that cone and you take the horse there and then stop and rest or do something and then go to the next point. So introduce more logical work to it, unless it's happening obviously out on the trail or something like that. If it's happening somewhere where you consider it to be logical training, so if you are out on the trail or going down the beach or doing point to point or checking the fences and the horse is still stopping, I would say that the horse it's either a pain issue or a discomfort issue, where the horse might get to the point where he thinks, oh, you know, I'm a little bit sore. A miscommunication issue. We had a horse at a clinic that was stopping quite frequently, and we determined, what I discovered was that it was happening when the rider's legs were coming a little bit further forward. The horse was fairly green or newly started. She'd only been under saddle for about 6 months, and the starter that had started her under saddle had put their feet forward to encourage the horse or to tell the horse to stop as a stop or a backup cue. So when the rider didn't even lose her balance, but when she was trotting around and her legs came a little bit forward, the horse would stop straight away, because the horse had been trained going, oh, I'm supposed to stop when your legs are forward. So the trainer had trained the horse in that particular way, but the rider rode in a particular way that caused her legs to go a little bit forward sometimes, and so it was just a conflict or a misunderstanding of communication. So I don't know your particular circumstance of you know, what's actually happening, how long the horse has been under saddle for, you know, if this is new, if this has always happened, everything like that. So I can only give a few tips in regards to what I think will help the issue. So definitely checking out whether it's a pain issue, introducing more logic into the training, if that's what you think it might be, doing exercises that are more point-to-point exercises, to ask the horse to go forward with freedom is what I call it, and making sure there's not a miscommunication with either the legs or the hands of the rider. The hands of the rider could be giving a stop cue without realizing it. So the next question is from Jackie again. Can you feed a supplement to help calm a horse successfully, or is it just hype? Is riding, work, and not overfeeding still the best way to keep a horse sane? So I really like this question, because I was only just talking to someone on the weekend at the Extreme Trail course, where we were smiling about the fact that nearly every single one of my behavioural videos starts with check what you're feeding your horse, check how much work that you're putting in. So it's energy in versus energy output, and understanding how horses are, what their physiology is and how they're meant to work normally. So supplements will work if there's an imbalance in the horse's nutrition or, you know, vitamin levels or anything like that. So if you think that could be a case, then definitely I think that supplements can help in that regard. So vitamin B is often a supplement that's recommended to help calm horses down. Or if a horse has a vitamin B deficiency, then it can cause the horse to be more anxious or a little bit more hyperactive. The same as it happens in humans. You know, if you go to the chemist or the pharmacy and say to the pharmacy, you know, I'm not sleeping very well, or I'm tense, or I'm this, or I'm that, quite often they'll say, oh, we need to check your vitamin B levels. You know, if you're lacking in vitamin B, then that's gonna keep you a little bit edgy. So definitely supplements can work if there's an imbalance or deficiency. So they're definitely worth trying. When it comes to hormonal mares and mare support, I absolutely think that herbs and supplements can help in that regard. You know, as with any animal that is meant to be, you know, breeding by the time they're of a certain age, they're going to be, you know, they're going to be cycling and things like that. So I think that herbal support and supplement support can definitely help in those situations. Chamomile flowers are another one that we hear get recommended quite a lot, and I absolutely feed those to my horses. I don't feed them to my horses because my horses are hyperactive or they need calming, which is what chamomile is renowned for, but chamomile also supports the gut. And so if the horse is anxious and he's causing more acid production in his gut, which is causing him to have discomfort, which is causing him to maybe have a few little ulcerations in his tummy, then feeding him chamomile can help address that issue, in which is going to fix the behavioral issue. So the short answer is yes, I think that supplements can help. No, they're not the be all and end all, and I don't think anything can beat riding, work, living in a herd, and all of those things that I always talk about in my talks. Knowing though that my horses are in a herd, my horses have the work, they have the herd, they've got all of that stuff, and I still supplement my horses because of our lifestyle. We're always on the road, we're always traveling, so they get boxed a fair bit over weekends and things like that. So I think I need to support my horses in that regard because of the way that you know, because of our life. Jackie again asked another one. I loved it. She sent me so many questions, which is really cool. How can you calm a horse when you go to a clinic? He is fine on the ground, but he is flighty under saddle. The first thing that I would say in regards to that would be, I would be checking on the rider and the rider's reaction to riding in a group, because if the horse is super calm during the ground work and then he gets really nervous when the rider hops on and he's under saddle, my first instinct would be to check that the rider's not got nerves in regards to riding in a group, and they're channeling that to the horse. So they're potentially grouping on somewhere or tightening the reins or behaving in such a way, or even just being anxious, and the horse is connected to that, and the horse goes, hang on a minute, we were fine on the ground and now you've got on me, and there's a stressful situation, so I'm going to react to that. So that would be the first thing that I would check in regards to that. If you don't think it's that at all, then I would practice riding the horse in a group where you can control the group. So obviously you can't control what happens in a clinic situation because everyone's there to do their thing and learn and do what the clinician's asking them to do. But if you've got a few friends that can come and ride with you and recreate a clinic style situation, you might be able to do that with 2 riders, and then 3, and then 5, and then 7, and slowly introduce to your horse that riding in a group is, it can be fun, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a stressful situation. What's Abby written? Sticky feet are alarm bells for me, potential butt coming. Absolutely, you know, I don't like when a horse has sticky feet, that's for sure. You guys know that, and that's definitely something that I want to address. That's obviously relative to the previous question. Lisa's saying, my internet ducks are not lining up tonight. I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you'll be able to catch it on the replay, Macnut. Good to have you here for the moment. The next question comes from Beth. Aggressive and dominant mares. So Beth's got a little bit of a situation happening at the moment where she's got a mare. I'm trying to remember this because I don't have the whole question in front of me because I'm using my phone to film this live. So she's got a situation where a mare that I don't believe she's typically an aggressive mare, but she has been aggressive in the last few weeks or couple of weeks or month or so. To the point where she is getting a little bit dangerous when it comes to Beth having to rug her and things like that. And Beth's question is, when is too much going to cause more issues? So Beth's been to quite a few clinics of mine. She knows the ground exercises and she knows how to use them to ask the horse to, you know, move its feet. And Beth knows how to control her space and ask the horse to move out of her space, which is what she's been doing when she finds the mare being reactive and being aggressive towards her. But what Beth's question is how much of that is actually potentially going to cause the mare to escalate more and become more aggressive? And, you know, where's the point, where's the line where we've got to say, wow, this is making it worse or this is making it better? So the answer to that question is that if the mare doesn't believe you in what you're doing, and doesn't believe that you will follow through, it will make her more aggressive. It's sort of like a situation where it's kind of like calling someone's bluff. So if you're in a situation, maybe an argument with someone, with a person, say this is a human-to-human argument, and I'm making this up as I go, so bear with me. If you're in a human-to-human argument, hey Brett, welcome, thank you for joining, and the person starts to escalate and offers a threat of some kind. So there may be a threat of, you know, I'm gonna call my neighbor over, or I'm gonna report you to the police, or I'm going to, I don't know, do something to your car. I don't know, some kind of threat. If that happens and you don't believe what they're saying, you think that they're bluffing, that bluff situation can make you even more angry and more infuriated, because you kind of go, how dare you threaten me, especially when I know that you're not going to do those things. And it's kind of the same situation with the mare. If you're moving the mare around, but you're a little bit hesitant or you're not confident with what you're doing, the mare can, you know, she can sense that, and so it can absolutely make the mare go, hang on a minute, you can't be pushing me around, because I don't think that you're going to back yourself up if you need to back yourself up. And so it can cause the mare to escalate her behavior to make you go away. When two mares or when horses have an argument in the paddock, the argument escalates to the point where I'm sure many of us have seen two horses double barreling at each other over and over and over and over and over again, and it keeps going until someone gives. You know, horses, when they get into a physical altercation, someone walks away. Someone says, yep, you're bigger, stronger, I give you the herd, or, you know, in stallions, I give you the herd, or I'm going to go over here, you can have that food, or you can have that water, or whatever the case may be. It's whatever they need to do to make the other one go away. So if you're in a situation with your mare where you're sort of giving her a phase 4, but she doesn't believe that it's phase 4, then she's potentially going to escalate her behavior to make you go away. So the answer to your question is yes, it can cause her to do that, but only if she doesn't believe what you're doing. Now, in order to help you with what the mare's doing, I don't have a lot of the details, but I know that you mentioned a couple of times rugging, and you mentioned a couple of times her bucket. So I'm assuming you mean that that's her feed bucket. So what I'm going to say is I would 100% be reducing the feed to the point where I wouldn't even be feeding. If I've got a mare that's aggressive and challenging me at feed time, I would not be feeding her. I would be finding some grassy hay, and that would be what she would be getting to eat, because if you're adding fuel to that, it's potentially, or it is going to add issues to it. So I would be taking the energy out of her. If she's experienced changes, I know that you mentioned that there was a change in paddock, and I couldn't really get whether the lead mare had gone away and so this horse is now left here, or whether the lead mare had gone away and this horse had actually been put into new pasture. So if this is new behavior and it's only been happening in the last month, then something has occurred to trigger this new behavior. She's either getting too much sugar or energy from the new pasture, and it's causing her to not be able to manage that energy, and it's coming out in aggression. She's either lost the lead mare, the lead mare's been taken to another. Okay, so Beth's saying, yes, the lead mare moved out. Okay, so the lead mare has moved out. So now this horse is saying, well, I'm going to be the lead mare. And she's potentially telling the other horses in the paddock that she's going to be the lead mare, and is just adding you to that mix because that's the routine that she's in at the moment. Or the horses in the paddock are not taking her seriously as the lead mare, and so she's trying to dominate you because she's saying, well, I need to dominate someone and something, and you're here, so you're going to cop it. So that's the situation in a nutshell. Please send me a private message and we can talk further about it, because I really don't want you to get yourself hurt, and it sounds like she is escalating. But I wouldn't be rugging her. I wouldn't be feeding her a hard feed. And I think the work that you're doing with her on the ground, she's saying they believe her. So she's obviously at the top, and she's just adding you to that mix for whatever reason now. I'd be trying to take the energy out of her, and if you can get yourself into, depending on how comfortable you feel with it, personally, I'd be putting the horse in a round yard, because if I'm attached to the horse with leads, I've got to be in a closer proximity than if I'm in a round yard and the horse is free. But if you're not confident being in a round yard while the horse is free, and you think that that's going to make her worse because she's going to attack you, then don't do it. You've got to go with where you feel most confident. I had someone at the colt start in January who the mare was pretty aggressive on the ground, and the person doing the colt start was not comfortable on the ground, and she wasn't particularly comfortable in the round yard either, because she felt that she was very vulnerable in the middle of the round yard. And so we had to set up some barrels and things like that, so she felt protected. She felt like she had a bit of a shield, which sounds extreme, but from what you've been saying, what that message said, some of the behaviors that's coming out in that mare, I would be putting her in the round yard and keeping her away from me and controlling her feet and things like that way. So yes, I hope that answered your question, Beth. I hope that helps, and please send me a private message so we can talk a little bit further on that. So another question that I got was riding a horse in a bit versus riding a horse bitless, and are they interchangeable, or will this confuse the horse? So the short answer to the question is no, it will not confuse the horse. My horse Cooper, I can ride him bridleless, I can ride him in a halter, I can ride him in a hackamore, as in a true hackamore bow sail. I can ride him in a snaffle bit, and I can ride him in a shank bit, and he has been in a 2-rein. So that is 6 different types of riding gear that I can ride my horse in, and he is quite comfortable in all of them. And I don't deliberately go out and ride in 6 different things. It just happens to be the lineage that his training has taken. Like I say, the short answer is no. What we need to consider is that everything that the horse does when they're being ridden is a trained response. So if we take the time to train the horse in a hackamore, and when I talk about a hackamore, I'm talking about a rawhide bow sail. I'm not talking about a rope halter that's been tied up like a hackamore. I'm not talking about a mechanical hackamore. None of those things. If you're going to take the time to teach the horse to ride in a hackamore, and you're going to take the time to teach the horse to ride in a snaffle, then there's no reason that you can't ride in both of those things, because the horse understands the cues. The other thing to consider, a hackamore and a snaffle are both primarily lateral devices, which means that they work laterally on the horse. So really, both of those things are quite similar in the way that they're asking for the horse to move, and they're quite similar in their cues. Obviously, a hackamore is going to cue the horse under here, under the chin, and the snaffle is going to cue the horse here on the corner of the mouth. So it's still giving an action on the side of the face. One of them is within the mouth and one of them is on the chin. If you are riding in a shank, which is a vertical device, and a hackamore, then a hackamore is a lateral device and a shank is a vertical device. Both of them can be trained separately, no problem at all. The horse can accept both of them. So the lady who asked me this question, I had I'm pretty sure the horse was an off-the-track thoroughbred maybe, or a horse that had been ridden in a snaffle before, and it was pretty bothered, and so they put it into a rope halter. Again, I don't have the question in front of me because it's on my phone, or the details in front of me. I've got the question written down. And what she said was that he was pretty good in the halter, which I have found 100%. If I get a racehorse, an off-the-track thoroughbred sent to me for retraining, one of the first things that I would do is take the bit out of its mouth, because jockeys obviously lean on the bit, and it has completely different cues than when we're riding out on the trail or whatever. So I retrain them in a hackamore, and then I put the snaffle back in, and I teach them how to re-accept the snaffle and re-accept the different cues that the snaffle is giving. So I hope that answered that question. Like I say, the short answer is 100% yes. The horses can accept to be ridden in both. I think Hillary's saying absolutely. Oh, there you go. She's saying I do it all the time. So yeah, changes from one to the other, and there's no issue at all. So just briefly, I want to say here with Cooper, I've just said by the time I ride that horse again, he will have spelled for 9 months. So when I bring him back in, he'll go straight back into the hackamore. But quite soon, once I feel like he's working well or going well, we'll start working on the 2-rein or something like that for him. And if, for example, I was working on the 2-rein in the arena, and I was doing nice quiet maneuvers and things like that, and the horse was accepting them and all had no problem with it, then I decided the next day to go down to the beach for a beach ride. I would probably put him back into the hackamore. So there's definitely different types of equipment that I would choose depending on the circumstances. If I was going to try and teach him something new, I would go into the hackamore because he's very familiar with that equipment. Or maybe I would even put him into a snaffle because he's familiar with that equipment. So I would definitely choose the equipment that is warranted for the task that I'm going to do, and the horse's level of education. What's another one? Karen sent in a question. Can you help a horse be more comfortable in the float? She's currently training a horse to self-load in the trailer, and he's pretty nervous. He gets in and he bites the trailer, and when he's backing out, she said he does break a sweat. He's quite nervous about being in there, even though she hasn't been putting any pressure on him. So she's asking, what are some of the things that she could probably do to make him a little bit more comfortable in the float. So the first thing, and I experienced this last weekend at a course where we had a horse that had been trailering pretty nicely, and he's fairly new to the owner, but he had been trailering pretty nicely, and now he's not trailering nicely at all, and in fact he has gotten to the point where he refuses to get on the trailer. And it's a brand new trailer, and it is different to the one that he is used to, but it was an angle load trailer that had the rubber matting on the dividers that hung to the floor. So the horse was indicating to me when I was doing the load that he was not comfortable with the trailer, that he was genuinely afraid of the trailer. And one of the first things that I said was, I think that these are probably flapping or moving during the ride, and they're touching his legs. And he's typically a bit fussy about his legs anyway. He's got Arab breeding, and Arabs are typically a little bit more sensitive about their legs. And so immediately I said, look, I think that that's probably part of the problem. And one of the things I suggested to the lady was, and I asked the lady, have you been for a ride in your float? It's something that I highly recommend, is having someone drive your car and trailer and you getting in your trailer, because you may hear feel, see sounds and things like that where you go, wow, I can't believe my horse is accepting of all these noises. There might be chains that are clanking, or like I say, dividers that are swinging or something like that, that really makes your horse not want to go in that trailer. And we just think, oh, he doesn't like the trailer, but we don't sort of further investigate. So go for a ride in your float and see if there's anything that really indicates to you why he may be worried about being in there. The second thing is to assess our driving, which is, it takes a little bit of self-reflection. I have seen people pull into showgrounds at an absolute rate of knots, and I think, you know, if that's the way you're driving into a showground that, you know, probably has a speed limit sign of 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers per hour, I can only imagine how you're approaching, you know, corners and roads and things like that. So probably reconsidering how you drive with the trailer on the back is something that we need to do. And roads. I moved onto a dirt road at one point, and it had very bad corrugations in the road, and I found that one of my more sensitive horses, once I had moved to that property, showed hesitation or reluctance about getting into the trailer, and I believe that it was due to the road. We had 2 kilometers of severe corrugations, and the float was just, you know, rattling on wheels, so to speak. So it was very uncomfortable for her. So considering what your driveway's like, or whether you have a repetitive road that you have to go on that is really bumpy, that's something else that we need to consider. And the third thing that I would recommend is trailering the horse with a sensible buddy. So I don't know whether Karen is putting him in with another horse or whether she's putting him in there on his own, but definitely trailering him with a horse that's really sensible and isn't going to have reactions and things like that. And then he can mimic that sensible behavior. When I first started taking Boogie out on the road with me, I took Cooper with her because Cooper knows how to be on the road. He knows how to stable. He eats, he drinks, he's happy to be at showgrounds. He doesn't call out, he doesn't get anxious. And so I took Cooper and Boogie on the road together for probably nearly 12 months, so she would learn the correct behavior about being on the road, and now she comes out on the road with me on her own, and she's an absolute superstar. She's a gem. So trailering the horse with a sensible buddy is another thing that I would recommend. Another question that we got, and I haven't written down the name of the person, I'm sorry, is why would a horse become more aggressive within the herd? So horses will become more aggressive in the herd if there's a lack of confidence within them, and sometimes that lack of confidence can come from several different reasons. Normally it's because of changes in the herd or herd dynamics. So I've heard of this and seen this happen when there's been a loss in the herd. So a horse has passed away, and typically if it's the lead horse that has passed away, then the horses below that horse will sometimes have an extreme lack of confidence because they've found out, okay, now we're on our own, we need to fend for ourselves, and not necessarily on their own as in they're the only horse left in the herd, but the herd has always looked to this leader, and now that leader is gone. So that can cause a lack of confidence, and then that lack of confidence can cause them to start chasing each other and things like that. Hey Jess, how you going? Thanks for joining. So a horse passing away or being sold or just being moved out of the paddock can cause a horse to become more aggressive. So as we spoke about with Beth in regards to her horse, that the lead horse has moved, and now her horse is becoming aggressive, is potentially because it's a lack of confidence on her part. It can also come from a change in the herd with a new horse coming into the herd, and it changes the dynamics and things like that, and it can cause the horse to feel that it needs to become more aggressive to maintain its hierarchy, or make sure that it's no longer going to be the bottom of the pecking order. I've seen horses at the bottom of the pecking order become very aggressive when a new horse gets added, because they think, well, here's my opportunity to not be at the bottom of the pecking order anymore, so I'm going to be super aggressive towards this other horse. It can also happen when there's new pasture or new feed, again, an energy in versus energy out kind of a situation. It can happen when a horse gains more confidence. So we see it sometimes when you've got a horse that may be at the bottom of the pecking order, and then we start them under saddle, for example, which if it's a good experience, it can make them a little bit more confident. And then they sort of walk in back into the paddock and they say, hey, I'm a big horse now. I feel a little bit more confident. And so they'll start trying to re-establish a new spot within the herd because of their newfound confidence. So that is another thing that can cause them to become more aggressive in the herd. And another thing that I've got written down here is just observing them for a long time. Sometimes food can obviously be the primary reason that they can be really aggressive. So I'd be watching the herd when there's no feed involved and just when they're sort of just generally walking around the paddock and things like that, and seeing if the aggression is relative to food being present, even to the owners being present. So when I observe a herd, I try and observe from a distance that they don't know that I'm there. So I can truly see, the way they're going to behave when they don't think that there's, their owners or humans about, so to speak. What other questions have I got? I don't know how many I've done so far. Oh, yes, I've done those two. We've got 2 questions left. These were late additions and I have forgotten to write the lady's name down who sent them to me, so I'm sorry. I think it started with D, so I'm going to say maybe it's Di or something like that. Broody that is hard to catch. So we've got a brood mare that is hard to catch because all she's ever been is a brood mare, so she's probably got relatively negative experiences with being caught. She gets caught to be bred, she gets caught to be medicated, she gets caught to be served. She gets caught when the foal gets weaned. So if you've got a typical broodmare situation, that's often their association with being caught is something negative. So what I would initially do is start spending time in the paddock, so just being present and not having that agenda of wanting to catch the horse. Get the horse used to your presence and get the horse used to you just sort of being there and like I say, not having an agenda, not trying to catch her all the time. If she's being fed, supplemented, I think the question said that she was pregnant again, so quite potentially she's being supplemented again. So when she's being fed, again, sitting there, I wouldn't sit right next to the feed bucket. I think that's a little bit unfair to force her to come up and stand there and eat when she's uncomfortable. But I would start with my chair at a reasonable distance and then slowly but surely I would start to move closer to the feed bucket, which sounds like a long and convoluted process, but, I'm into building relationships, so I don't think that it's going to do, it's definitely not going to do any harm, and it's going to go a long way to the horse just being introduced to the idea that your presence is just normal and things like that. And then when you are catching her and you are working on catching her, make sure you spend time catching her and just doing something positive. So catch her and give her a treat, or catch her and give her a feed, and then catch her and give her a groom, like separately obviously, and then let her go. So she starts to think, oh, being caught isn't so bad because it's not always something that has to be done to me. I'm not always being caught to get something done. And the last question is, we've got a 2-year-old horse that is, it takes off. It's learnt to turn and take off when it's being led up the paddock. And the lady does not have access to a round yard, and the facility where the horse is being boarded does not permit lunging exercises and things like that. So you are pretty restricted in regards to how you're going to help this horse overcome this problem, because that's the first thing I would recommend would be a round yard and or lunging exercises. But what you can do is when you're leading the horse, make sure that you do have a flexion in the horse towards you. So I'm not talking racehorse leading where you've got him by the knot, you've got your elbow in his neck, where you've got that control rein. But I definitely would have a slight bend in the horse towards you. So hopefully it'll give you enough time that when he ducks his head to take that rein, that you'll be able to take a hold of that rein and disengage the hindquarter. That's what you need to be able to do. That's what's going to fix it. Or go towards fixing it, because what's going to happen is the horse is going to be bent towards you, he's going to duck, you're going to take a hold of the rein and then ask him to disengage. And if his bum's going away from you, then his head's going to come towards you. So what you're going to do is replace the behavior of ducking and pulling to ducking and coming towards you. And it's just going to replace that behavior as him. Another thing that you can do is keep him busy while you're leading him. So make sure that you're not sort of just walking him to the paddock. Keep him a little busy by doing a few flexions, maybe ask him to side pass a little, maybe ask him to do some hindquarter yields, things like that. So his focus is on you and not to wherever he's trying to pull away from and leave. And the final thing is avoid building the habit. So I meet a few people, particularly people on really big studs, that can have this habit, because what's happened when the horse has been young is that to move a horse from paddock to paddock, or to move a horse from the paddock to the stables, or to move the horses wherever they're going, to save time, what can happen is that they'll go ahead and open the gate to the paddock and sort of let the horses run up the laneways and things like that to get them to a new paddock or to get them to the stable. Well, what that does is it creates the idea in the horse's mind that when the gate's open, that he's meant to run, and he kind of doesn't know, especially being a young horse, he doesn't really know that he's not supposed to do that when he's attached to you, because he says, well, every time the gate's open, we normally run up here. What's the difference when I've got a halter and lead on? So that would be something, in case that's something that is being done, you need to remove that altogether, and that's going to start taking the idea out of his head. And lateral bend and hindquarter yields on the spot is going to start keeping him in that halter and responding to that halter, doing those kind of exercises. So I hope everyone enjoyed tonight's Monday Night Live. I know I really did. I really loved it. And I'm certainly going to do another one of these question nights, because, as I said, I really like to give you guys content and information that you want to hear. And what better way to do that than to ask you for topics. So please send me topics that you would like to hear me address on the Monday Night Lives, because when I've got a full topic, I can definitely do a full show on the topic. But I also like the what we call the elevator question. So if you ran into me in the street and you quickly asked me a question and I only had 5 minutes or something to answer it, then it gets you started on the right track to hopefully overcoming some of the challenges that we face with our horses. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you joining me, and I really appreciate you sending me questions, sharing, and all that sort of stuff. Hannah says hello and goodbye. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, Hannah. You're welcome, Michelle. Thank you, Hillary. Thanks, Abby. Thank you all so much. It means a lot to me. I hope everyone has an absolutely brilliant week. And Michelle, I will expect that sunshine when I arrive in New Zealand on Thursday. Thanks, everyone.